And good evening, everybody. It is July. Can you imagine it? It's July 30th, 2025. And here we have our Wednesday, almost weekly podcast, talking to interesting people throughout the White Mountain region. Today, we're going to be talking with Andy Vilaine. Andy Vilaine loves the White Mountains. He works in the White Mountains. He's part of Pemigewasset Search and Rescue, and he loves to explore things off the beaten path, which is fantastic. So he's going to have lots of stories for us. He just told me about something he's working on with these extreme hikes, which is going to be great. Maybe we'll touch on that later. Hopefully we will. And hope you've been enjoying this beautiful summer weather. You really can't complain. A little bit of showers coming through right now, maybe a couple of thunderstorms. And I mean, nice summer heat, okay? Because if anybody's complaining about the heat, my favorite season's coming right up, winter. Think about it. In 3.5 months, we will be skiing. We will have winter hiking very, very soon. And before we get to Andy, have you heard of the new sandwich shop that is in Lincoln? In Lincoln, New Hampshire, Fresh Track Sandwich Shops. My friend Kate just opened this a few weeks ago. They are open 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. They have breakfast sandwiches, lunch sandwiches made to order. Everything is fresh. Most of it's also locally obtained. If you can go onto the QR code at the bottom, you can call in your takeout order. You can also order online or go in and say hi. Kate's a wonderful woman who's put her heart and soul into her business. And also, if you want something unique and freshly made, all their foods, Streets in Woodstock. They're located on East Side Road. They have some of the best pork sandwiches that you'll ever have. Pulled pork, my gosh, everything is made locally sourced, locally produced. And they also have daily desserts that they'll have on their special board. They also have fresh squeezed lemonade, herbal iced tea, assorted sodas. And this weekend, as I found out today, they're going to have, yes, lobsters, lobster rolls. Do you like lobster rolls? Go to Streets. I'm not just saying it. They are fantastic. You'll enjoy it very, very much. And ladies and gentlemen, let's now bring onto the stage Andy. Andy, welcome to the Pemi Valley Podcast, and thank you for taking some time to tell us what's going to be some fantastic stories.
Oh, you're very welcome, John. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. So far, we haven't met each other. We just met each other online right now. A friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, got us together, and she had said that you were going to have some really good stories because you do have a very interesting background at where you moved into the White Mountains. You work for the Cog Railway, and you're also part of Pemigewasset Search and Rescue. And just following you / stalking you a little bit on social media, a lot of your trips that you take, especially your recent trips in Maine, are fantastic. So let's start at the beginning. Let's tell everybody who you are and, well, what you're about.
Sure. So I'm Andy Vilaine, and I live in Jackson, New Hampshire, and I'm what's known as the train master at the Mount Washington Cog Railway. Train master sounds like a really elaborate job title. Essentially, it is basically an operations manager. So I'm in charge of the train crews, railway operations, scheduling, rules, departures, substitutions, anything that has to do with the railway side of the business. And this is something that really kind of links my two main passions together. So the outdoors and railroading. So from a young age, I did fall in love with trains, that typical kid story. And I never thought that I'd be working with them. I thought it was just a sort of a childhood fixation you move on from, and that would be that. But back in 2015, I wanted to shake up my life a bit. I was living down in Massachusetts, and I'd always spent summers up here in the White Mountains. I have my family to thank for that. My mom and dad would bring myself and my brother up here for summer vacations. We would camp, we would hike, we would check out some of the attractions. And from that young age, I really fell in love with this region, and I figured I would love to live there one day, but I never really knew how that would be possible or if I could make that happen. So when some life circumstances changed in 2015, it allowed me to look at embracing that possibility of escaping up to the White Mountains, changing careers. And I noticed that the Cog Railway was hiring at that point for brakeman, which is sort of the entry position where you are a hybrid of tour guide and sort of overseeing safety on the rail car with the passengers. And I started there, and I've just kind of worked my way up the line. I left behind my roots in Massachusetts, where I worked in live music, particularly in venue security. I was the head of security for a couple different venues, so it was very different. But the great thing about this place is they'll teach you everything in house. So I've learned so much here. There's no job I've ever had where I've been able to acquire as much knowledge and skill as right here at the Cog, and that's been wonderful in allowing me to sort of build my skill base and resume and grow within the company here.
Hmm. I love your love of trains. I did take I love trains myself. And 2 years ago, I decided to, on my yearly trip out to Utah, I'm like, I'm going to take the train. And
Mhm.
that was an experience. I'm glad I did it. Not sure if I'm going to do it again, but that was just only for the amount of time that it took. But the Cog Railway, if anybody has not been on the Cog Railway, I highly recommend it. What an engineering marvel. And it's not like it was built in the last 20 years. Like this is over 100 years old.
Mhm.
And even though I'll admit I would love to look at it when I'm hiking, just looking up the Cog Railway, and especially they had coal run engines. Now they have the biodiesel, and I'd always just admire it. And what got me, well, I'll do admit, I never took the Cog until last October. That
Mhm.
was the first time my Kristen and I decide in October we do tourist things. I'm like, I've never taken the Cog. Have you? No, she's grown up. She grew up in Lyman.
Mhm.
And so it is really cool. I mean, the steepness, the views, the conditions that it's in. And again, it seems like a lot of the things are made right there. The biodiesel engines, weren't they developed by the Cog Railway?
Yes, there's been a pretty high degree of self-sufficiency within the railway going back to the inception. So 1869 was when everything got started here, and the railway has been uh, really at the forefront of making things in-house, innovating unique things for their own purposes. And you can't quite buy things off the shelf for use on this mountain. So we're innovating, engineering, and producing them on site. So these biodiesel engines that we've had since 2008 are completely designed by our in-house mechanical engineering team, constructed by our fabricators and our shop crew, and built and assembled right here. And they're only running right here. So they're very unique to us, and they're not something that you would see on any other railway or even any other cog railway. Not that there's too many of them, but the other major cog railway in the United States is Pikes Peak in Colorado, and their
Mhm.
equipment's very different. They actually had the Swiss build them engines for their use when they kind of upgraded their infrastructure a few years back. But we've been building our own stuff right here and maintaining our own track structure, and our base station area has a large shop facility with overhead cranes and air casters to move things around. So even though there's a lot of history here, and the cog is rife with the historical connection it has, we've really embraced the 21st century with a lot of these technologies, and kind of brought the railway into the modern era with still giving them kind of mindful eye to our rich history for sure.
And so, wow. So with all all the things that are fabricated right there at the Cog, like is there like a full-time engineering crew, or is it
Yes.
that people have been there for so long? This must be like a year-round operation. Like, so in the off season, the wintertime, the amount of work that's being done to get it prepared for the spring, summer, and fall.
Yeah, our off season, it used to be we were closed in the off season completely, and that gave us time to do teardowns and maintenance, rebuilds, and things like that. Starting a few years ago, right around COVID, we experimented with winter operations, which go partway up the mountain, about a third of the way to what's called Wambeck Station. So it is a slower time of year. It allows us to still do our winter maintenance. We have less overall units running, so our shop crew can focus on rebuilds and maintenance, and our engineering team can work on fabricating and coming up with stuff that they need to build, and our engineers can interface with the fabricators. So it allows for work to be done that we need, but we're still open so folks can experience the winterscape of the mountain, and so the company can capture revenue at a time where previously we were just dead closed for the entirety of the winter.
Mhm.
But that is our maintenance season is typically from November until April.
And the actually, when you mentioned the Wamback station, I remember hearing about that they were going to actually have some sleeper cars, and eventually, maybe, be able to, like, the Cog is going to bring you up. You're going to be able to stay in sleeper cars about 2/3 of the way up the mountain. I believe. I don't know if that plan is still in motion.
It's kind of a tabled idea. So it was something that was discussed more heavily a few years ago, and we've kind of focused on other projects right now. So it's not forever abandoned, but it's sort of on on a distant back burner right now, while we look at some things that we're doing around the base and upgrading some equipment and taking on some projects that we've identified as sort of higher order needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's not gone. Just like, as you said, table for a little while.
Yeah, and there's some considerations with it that we have to think about, and ramifications of what it would be like to have people spending the night up there, and infrastructure and impact on the mountain. So there's a lot that kind of goes with that. So it's something that, we're definitely not totally abandoning, but it's sort of, it's over here somewhere, off to the side for the moment.
Cool. No, I think it's a really neat idea. And so, as you've been working with the Cog Railway, you also were drawn to, obviously you like hiking, obviously you like to push yourself. And I think it's great that you volunteer at the Pemigewasset Search and Rescue. So how did that come about? Just one day, were you looking at a search and rescue and just decided, I want to be part of this team? Because there's a lot of people that I've met over the decades, and when they really got into hiking and backpacking, it was, I would say this in a good way, it was almost strange how they were just like, I want to be part of that, and they just jumped in 100%. So how did it stick with you?
It was kind of a culmination of factors. We've in recent years really become more involved with assisting in search and rescue efforts at the railway. Mm-hmm. So when Fish and Game has a mission going on the west side of the mountain here, and it behooves the mission to utilize the train for easy access, they will call upon us to render a train to bring rescuers up for putting in at, say, West Side Trail or Gulf Side. And then there's a warm waiting train as well. So when the victim can be transported or carried back to the train, that potentially is a life-saving measure there. So as we became more involved with rendering our own assistance to the rescue efforts and bringing rescuers up, working with Fish and Game, working with the teams, both AVSAR and PEMI, I became interested. I always had a latent interest in it. I wanted to give back to the community I'm in. Mm-hmm. And I always sort of falsely assumed that I wouldn't have enough time to respond to calls. I'm pretty busy here at work, and then I've got a lot of other things going on. So I figured, well, I shouldn't sign up for something like that because I don't know what I could commit to it. And that's the beauty of these volunteer teams, though, is your commitment is based on your availability. So when a call comes out, we then respond if we're available, and then we can respond, or you can decline, say you're at work and you cannot get out, or you're out of the area. So you respond to what you're able to respond to. And I can attest, when you have to decline a call, it hits you here, but then you can look and see who is responding and know that they have enough folks, for a carrier or whatever may be going on. So I think it was from getting involved here on the COG side and rendering our assistance, and then realizing that, well, I can give back to this. I can offer something as time allows, and when calls come in that I can respond to, I'll be able to do that. And I do have a bit more flexibility in my schedule here now in recent years. So, I talk to folks here and I can set things up. I can leave maybe early if there's a call in the area, and, shoot over to Franconia Notch for a call, like I've done a few times right here from work. So that, in conjunction with the fact that another podcast, okay to mention another podcast?
Oh, go right ahead. I know which one you're going to say, and it's a really nice podcast.
the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcast.
Right, and that's really cool.
Yep. Got involved with those guys and met those guys, became friends with them. And Stomp, Jamie, is now the head of PEMI, and he was encouraging me as well. You should go out for it. You would be a great asset to the team. And, from his encouragement and getting to know him, and then my own desire, and then having participated in some way here with the railway, that all kind of came together for me. And I went out for the team finally. And it's been, even in the short time I've been a member, it's been very rewarding and great networking and camaraderie too. The folks you meet on the team and the skills you build, the trainings we have are just absolutely top notch. And that's another side to it. So of course you're out there with that selfless aspect of helping folks that are in your community doing things that you do and love as well. But there's also that social aspect and that skill building aspect as well.
That's right. And so that is pretty wild that everybody that I've met who's part of the search and rescue, and all those volunteers, because people have to remember too, this was all volunteer. Mm-hmm. This is like a love of wanting to go help other people, and you love of the recreation activities that we like to do. And when you now were on board, what was that first call?
So my
You got
first
to go on.
call was actually it was a little strange. I was initially responding to one call and then had to pivot because there was a concurrent call that wound up uh, essentially pulling us away and having to redirect resources. So we had a call that had gone out for uh, Twin Brook, and we had a response to that. And then while we were there, the radios were going off, and I overheard chatter that there was a hyperthermic hiker on the Gulfside Trail uh, over back towards where I just came from work. So now here we are with a call that came in around 5 o'clock on June the 20th. And this call was essentially something that I quickly identified as something would be beneficial for the railway to perhaps assist in, given that the hiker was about a mile over on the Gulf Side Trail, going just beyond the Jewel Trail. And I spoke with Fish and Game, and then our president of the company, and said, "Yeah, we can secure a train." Fish and Game was initially not sure if we'd be able to, because we had actually closed the train to the top that day earlier in the day because of wind speed. The winds had been gusting over 100 miles an hour that day. So when that happens, we curtail the trips down to Skyline, and we cease running to the top. So they weren't sure if we'd be able to render a train up to that point given the winds. But the winds had come down a bit. They're in the 80s at that point, gusts, which is more manageable. The train equipment can totally take it. It's more of, we don't like to bring tourists up into hurricane strength winds because of the safety factor there.
Mm-hmm.
So in speaking with Fish and Game, we developed a plan, and we had a primary response from AVSAR over here at the railway and Fish and Game. And then I was representative from PEMI over here, kind of doing dual duty, where we got the train going. I called in a crew, we rallied the train, and then I went up on the train, and we responded to the point where the victim was off of the, just on the Gulf Side Trail. They had been doing presidential traverse, and it actually come from the Madison Hut earlier in the day. And the conditions that day were fairly deplorable. There was high wind. It was soaking wet, wind chills in the 20s, and just a nasty day for June, as we know can happen up there. But they were not prepared for it. And there have been cautionary words for folks to not venture out of the, where if they're in huts, to shelter in place, wait for this to pass. And then for whatever reason, that message wasn't heeded in this example. And unfortunately, with the individual in question, it wound up taking a pretty severe toll, and hypothermia really began to set in after all of that assault they were taking exposed up there coming across Gulfside. So by the time we responded with the initial team, we kind of did two waves. We brought up an initial team on a train so we could get a quick response, kind of a hasty response up there. And that was primarily Fish and Game, Mike Pelchat, myself, and Will from AVSAR. And we went up with some material so we could get a bothy bag going and a temporary shelter to warm the victim. And we responded over to that area, and we were able to get that process going while the train then returned to pick up members from AVSAR so they could come up to then assist in what was eventually going to be a carry. And that carry was going to be aided by the fact that the train is just over a mile away now, as opposed to having to carry down, back, say, the Jewel Trail back to the base. And
right.
That warm train waiting may have in fact made the difference in this case, because between our efforts to warm her in the bag and then having a train standing by, it's potential that may have been the make or break for this being a fatal versus non-fatal call, which is really a sobering piece of information when you kind of sat with that in the debrief from this incident, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Easily. So the chance of life and death right there. I think you're absolutely correct with that. The number one, setting up the shelter that you had to set up, and then getting her onto the train to come down. Absolutely. I think that I'm glad that could happen. And well, it's good to see that your first call, you just jumped right in. This wasn't a simple twisted ankle. That is technical, and that is wow. That's also, as you said about the team effort, being coordinated. And what's really impressive is that the Cog Railway, it seems like the ownership, the owners have no problem. Where if it's going to be needed for a rescue, it just seems to be from other stories that I've read.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And for calling the rest of the crew in, so I'm assuming the crew doesn't live too far away, but that is commitment, and I think that's so generous that they do that. That option is there.
Yeah, when Fish and Game reaches out to us for assistance on a call, if we at all can, we will. And there aren't too many circumstances where we wouldn't be able to. We've assisted in winter condition calls before, adverse weather like this one we just talked about with the high winds. So if they're calling, we're answering, and we're going to lend that assistance. And the crew here is exceptional. We have people here that are literally beating down my cubicle wall. I guess I don't have a door per se, but saying, "Hey, call me if this happens. I would love to assist with this. I would love to be, one of the on-call people." So I actually have. You can never have too many, but I have no shortage of folks that are willing to be called, and at sometimes at all hours of the day after the workday is done, even if they already worked a full day, willing to come and aid with something like that. And the key ones that we go to, they live very close, so that helps as well. And the response time is pretty quick.
That's incredible. That's great that the Cog Railway has staff members like you're just describing. Good for you guys. That's great. Actually, speaking of, we're going to pull up one of your pictures right now that you've shared with me, and if you would like to talk about this particular mission and what's happening here.
Sure. So this was just after we arrived to basically where the West Side Trail cuts underneath the track. So we're getting ready to head over with our quick, hasty response team over to the victim's location here. So we're going to head down West Side Junction in with Gulf Side and go across past Clay and then make our way towards the victim. So we had just got off the train at this point, and the train is about ready to actually return to base here to pick up the second wave that's going to be coming up that will eventually wind up aiding in the carry out. And this is the Fish and Game team as we're making our way across on Gulf Side. So the conditions were pretty agreeable at that point compared to what earlier in the day was. So the visibility had just started to open up a bit. It was pretty well socked in for the majority of the day, very wet and raw and just brutally cold, terrible with the wind chill. And winds had now subsided at this point when this picture was taken into the 50s and 60s from what had started at one point in the day in the 120s and then had begun to relax. And when the train got there, we still had some gusts in the 80s, but now we were dealing with 60 miles an hour, which is no joke, but it's compared to 80 and above, it's definitely a lot more agreeable to make your way across on that exposed terrain.
It is wild when you're up there. There is nothing to stop that wind when you're in a storm, and as you say, hurricane force winds. 60 miles an hour is big. I know sometimes people will say like, "Oh, I was up there with 90-mile-an-hour winds." I'm like, "No, it's probably more like 45." That's a lot. I mean,
Right.
you're up there and you're exposed. Now you put in any other element of snow or being clouded in, it can get disorientating and it diminishes your ability to keep moving rapidly. So it really is no joke. So when people say, don't venture out right now unless you have the proper equipment or if there's some reason why you have to, really heed those warnings because things can go wrong so fast. As you're saying, this happened in June. Was it 4 years ago? It was June 20th or maybe it was the 21st. There was a snowstorm,
Mm,
4,000 feet and above. And
yes.
that snowstorm, it wasn't a couple inches. Like we're talking feet of snow. And unfortunately, some very bad things had happened, as you know. But people really were still caught. Like even though there was plenty of warning, no, just venturing up there, it is absolutely no joke.
Yeah.
Yep.
The conditions that prevail up there. I mean, the warning signs at tree line are nothing to take lightly. And folks that are hiking from out of the region, like was the case with the individual in this case, may not be prepared or ready for just how rapidly things change and how quickly things can degrade, and the reputation for not only severe weather but the rapidly changing conditions that can occur here in the presidentials. And a lot of people do get caught off guard, and it happens time and time again, in spite of, however many stories and lessons there are out there about it.
Mhm.
And that can get very serious very fast, and your margin for error just really shrinks down in conditions like that. So
Right.
here is right here, we're looking at the carry over towards the train. When you see that light of the train in the distance, you really get this good feeling, because now you've got to the point where you've got waiting a degree of safety there. So there's warmth, there's shelter from the elements, and that's going to get everyone transported to the base in about 28 minutes from where that point is. So it's great to see that cutting through the fog in the night, that big light on the train. So, we're team carrying the litter here, and then we're going to get over to the train and get up into the train car for transport to the base station here. And this is basically in our train car as everyone's riding down. And we got members of AVSAR here, Fish and Game, on board, and then the crew members at the front of the coach near the auxiliary braking system. Victim is out of photo to right and rear.
Mhm.
And this is a great way, a great alternative to being transported down, rather than having to carry the 3.5+ miles down the trail with a carry, and the amount of time that would certainly take. So from this point, we're 28 minutes to the base, and there's really no substitute for that speed and expeditiousness of being able to do that in that time frame.
And when you mentioned about seeing that light, and so that's going to be, really the saving. Here we have the train coming, so it's going to save everybody. And just to make it that much easier going down, that must be, yeah, as you said, a great feeling. Just to look at that alone, knowing that it's almost over. As you said,
Right.
28 minutes to the base. This is going to be over, and it's a successful rescue. But let's probably should broaden this a little bit more. We were mentioning all the different, fishing game being there, the
Mhm.
different groups of volunteers to rescue. How many people were involved in this particular rescue? And remember, this is one rescue, so this is a very highly coordinated and many people being involved.
Yeah, the response is pretty significant when you have a rescue with a carry. That way you can have uh, multiple rotations on the litter, and you can look out for the well-being of the rescuers as well as the victim. So with a response like this, I want to say we had, all in all, probably about 24 folks between Fish and Game and the volunteer teams, which is a pretty good response for something like this, so that you can have 3 full rotations on a litter if you want to do 3 full. But the beauty of this one is, with just a little over a mile carry, you're not exhausting everyone to the same degree as you would on a full carry out. Coming all the way down from that elevation. So just having to cut across with very minimal elevation gain and loss. Now, granted, it's windy and it's dark, and there's still a lot of hazards there. That waiting train aspect is not only something that is incredibly beneficial for the victim, but also for the rescuers and the safety of the personnel, being able to not have to engage in a protracted carry out at night in sort of not the most ideal set of conditions.
No, no, not at all. And and even with the train, like the amount of hours that were involved from when it started to successfully obtained, how long was that?
Say the initial call came in at 5 o'clock. I'm reviewing the press release. Just after 5 o'clock, the 911 call. We had the train up just before 7 with the first team, the second team just before 8. And I remember that night being down and ready to go home around, it was either 11 or just before. Um, and that was, significant time spent on scene, in the temporary shelter, warming slowly. And all things considered, that sounds like a long time. You think, oh, 6 hours from call to being at the bottom. But typically these types of carries, you're looking at a much longer night if you're carrying all the way down from 3.5, 4 miles away from a trailhead. So yes, it's a long response, but in terms of what could be the case, it was definitely expedited. And certainly no way, even if it was a consideration of practicality, there would have been no way in these conditions and winds to even explore the possibility of a helicopter lift. So it was either a full carry or utilize the train. And the train only goes certain places, but when we're able, this is the kind of thing we want to be able to do and help and provide.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That is a got a little ahead of myself. And as you said, it's a tool that can be utilized, and this helps out everyone from rescuers to the victim. And that's fantastic. And again, that's one rescue that you just told us about, just one. And we're gonna, as Andy and I had emailed back and forth a couple of times before our talk right now, and it's going to bring this up where you do have people. It happens sometimes. People just they're not preparing properly. We've seen something over the last some years where when I started backpacking and hiking pushing 40 years ago now, there was something about making sure you have everything with you. So you always have something extra in case something goes wrong. There's always a backup. And you can probably look at pictures of me backpacking in my 20s where clearly I am probably carrying more than what I needed to,
Mhm.
but you always had something as a backup. You always pack for rain. You always have something for wind. You always have something for cold. And I think over the last couple decades, it seemed to be weaned off of. I know some people really like to go more extreme.
Mhm.
It's understandable that you want to carry less, which is fine if you have, mm, well, a backup plan if somebody knows exactly where you are. But
Right.
it does seem like a lot of people carry less and less and less. I was following this man who was cowboy camping on the Appalachian Mountain Trail.
Mm.
Fine. And anybody doesn't know what that means. That means no tent, no sleeping bag. Cowboy camping really has a sleeping bag, but okay. No, but the pretty much just like a blanket. And this
Wow.
person, and that's all this individual is using. That's his choice, but all you need is the weather to go simply wrong. And you're going to be in a lot of trouble depending where you are. If you cannot get out of the elements, get down to a lower elevation. And have you seen in your experience so far, or have you in your circles of all the volunteers, has anybody really noticed that? Or is it really an uptick? Yes, there's always been somebody caught out there without the right equipment. But
Sure.
now it seems like people have a start time and end time. This is what I'm going to carry, and yeah, if something goes wrong, you are in trouble. So have you seen like an uptick with that?
To a certain extent, yes. We see a lot of hikers come through here. The railway, pretty good bevy of activity here at two trailheads with Jewel and Amanusic,
Mhm.
and I interface with a lot of them. Some of them have questions and approach us. Some of them I'll approach just to ask them what their plans are. It's not a judgment, other than it's more an assessment. If I see their gear or their lack thereof, I'll come ask them what they're thinking of doing, and it's not for me to try to tell them what to do, but to maybe educate and to maybe give a suggestion about what they're thinking of doing that day and what they're prepared to do. Uh, I think a lot of folks, and I want to draw a distinction here. There are ways to go light where you are still bringing the 10 essentials. You are still well prepared for your trail and and what your itinerary is. You have a map, you have a compass, you have some kind of navigating skill to orient yourself, and you have a healthy respect for the elements of where you're going. And then you have maybe a lighter rendered version of the 10 essentials. Ultralight gear has come a long way, and that's wonderful. I mean, I think
Mhm.
there's a lot to be said for the advances in technologies in that department. But then you've got folks that are, and not everyone, but there's a subset of folks that will jettison the idea of carrying so much gear so they can be fast and light. Uh, you know, Folks that are thinking that a lot of this extraneous, what they think might be extraneous stuff or whatever they might be attempting, if they leave that behind, they can go faster. They can have less, tax on their body. And that comes with a price. It basically, like we talked about earlier, it narrows the window for margin of error. Something goes wrong, now you are less apt to be able to address that. And I think we've seen a bit more of that. I mean, in general, the amount of hikers on the trail now has increased. There's more outdoor recreation going on ever since COVID. Hiking has uptick in popularity, and that's a
Mhm.
good thing. I mean, there are things that come with that where I think some of the education needs to catch up with the influx of folks into the activity pool. But for the by and large, folks enjoying the outdoors, that's a good thing. We don't want to dissuade anyone from doing that, but we want to
No,
encourage them
no.
to enter into it in a responsible and educated manner. And I think, if you are foregoing essentials to make yourself lighter, that's never a good, swap of resources. Okay, so I didn't bring enough water, or I didn't bring any other gear for weather because I wanted to be fast and light. And folks that are experienced trail runners, they're not doing this. This is sort of a novice idea, or maybe folks are unaware of what the essentials that they should have are. So, definitely want to make it clear, I'm not slamming like the trail running community or folks that are, using ultralight gear, but more so folks that are maybe not even aware of what they should be carrying, or they think, well, that's really heavy, I don't need to carry that. Or, okay, why do I need this puffer jacket? It's July, I definitely don't need that. And it's a give and a take. You might think you don't need it, but you're exposed above tree line for a good portion of your hike, and that weather turns and you don't have it. Now, what's worse, that little bit of extra weight, or volume in your pack, or the fact that now you've got to deal with this condition that's arisen that you maybe didn't account for without the gear to embrace it properly.
Right. And we've again, a simple raincoat. It's like,
Yeah.
so if you there have been times in the White Mountains, or any mountain range for that matter, like, the weather forecast does say it could be like moderate winds, mostly sunny skies. But I'll never forget this one time. Here I am at my house in Woodstock. You look to the northeast and you can see Franconia Ridge. And I was mowing the lawn, and it was the weirdest day because it was beautiful. It was blue
Mhm.
skies, it was nice and warm, but Franconia Ridge was socked in these jet
Mhm.
black clouds. Nothing over Cannon, really nothing over the Pemigewasset Wilderness. It was just on Franconia Ridge. And even in broad daylight, you could see flashes in that black cloud that was just shrouding the whole ridge. And it was interesting because I went to work at the particular restaurant that I was working that night, and I bumped into a man who was up there, and actually was, I think he was on Lincoln, that he could not, as he said, he could not get lower onto the
Mhm.
trail because of the lightning that was coming over, and he was in the middle of it. He goes, you could just feel everything being electrified. He goes, there was nothing like this in the forecast. So it just shows that it can go wrong, and you just never know. And having like the backup, mind you, I'm giving an extreme case because this guy thought this was it with the lightning strikes. He's in the middle of the thunderstorm, and then he was there for 3 hours, and then it just disappeared. I
Mhm.
remember watching that. It's like this amazing how fast things can turn. And as he said, soaking wet, freezing cold, and
Mhm.
terrified. And when he's all done, he's like, I had no idea that this could happen. I'm like, you were in the middle of that? Here I was looking in the valley, looking up and seeing this whole phenomenon happen.
Right. And that's a great example, because once you get wet, and then if you're not able to get yourself from wherever you are soaking wet to either into some other type of clothing or away from the condition we were exposed, now you've got to sit in these wet clothes. And that's where hypothermia can be a real risk, even if the calendar says that it's summer.
Right.
And a lot of folks don't take that into account. Is they might think, well, if I get wet, I'll just come down. Well, what if you can't? What if you are waiting out a thunderstorm? What if you have an injury and you can't, locomote yourself down the trail into safety below tree line, and you have to wait for a while? I always go heavy. I mean, my pack is sometimes needlessly heavy, and um, there's never a lack of things in there. So I have
Mhm.
always have rain gear, even if I think that there's 1% chance it's going to rain. Uh, there's rain gear in there. There's change of base layers, change of socks, and then everything else I need is at hand. And I do drink quite a bit of water, so a lot of my pack weight is from water as well. But I don't want to ever be caught wishing I had grabbed X thing and brought it with me. I want to say, I need this. Okay, I have it right here. Um, if I'm going on a quick trail run and I know the conditions of where I'm going, and there's a more limited risk involved, I'm not going, way above tree line for extended exposure, I might tailor my, bring my running vest and only certain things fit in there, but I'm still bringing key essentials in there. And I'm not just, you know, going out there like I'm walking down the street.
Right.
And I think when folks enter into the activity as for lack of a better word, beginners, sometimes there's a disconnect between what a certain level of preparedness should be and what they want to sacrifice to embrace things fast and light. And folks that are experienced, they know how to do that, and they know how to bridge that gap. And I think when people first get into it, sometimes maybe they don't, and that can increase the risk of a situation where someone might need a rescue, or might run into a time where they get injured or put themselves at risk up there. We have a lot of the microclimates we have present here in these mountains. That weather turns rapidly. It's hard to predict. You might think you're going to have a bluebird day, and then some pop-up thunderstorms come. And if you don't have your rain gear, and like your story, you're sitting in that and just getting pounded by that, that's going to absolutely put you at risk. And that's something that people should always think about is, yes, it may be a good day when you start, but what could transpire?
Right. Right. And yeah, it is. I was thinking about a bunch of other examples at the same time, about those essential items that you should be having, and also items that everybody has gone hiking and had a shoelace break,
Hmm.
maybe more than once, and that you're 12 miles out and now have some inclement weather, and all you're doing is like retying this one. Okay, never. If anything, so I always have the essentials, pretty much always have the essentials with me, but there's always shoelaces too. That can also ruin your day and slow you down horrifically. It may sound silly, but it's really not. It's not,
No,
it's
that's a
not
good
silly at
point.
all.
It's nothing I've thought of directly. I do have some small. I have different kinds of cordage in my pack, and one of them is small enough it could double as a shoelace. But I hadn't thought specifically of shoelaces before. But now that you mention it, that is something that if it breaks, you're going to have a really bad time getting down from where you're at.
I do. It was actually, remember specifically, it was like 10 years ago. I was at 13 Falls, and that's where it broke. But it broke again. So I kept on tying it
Ooh,
lower and lower. I'm like, needless to
yep.
say, the limp that I had by the time I got to Lincoln Woods Trail, I'm like, F my life. Really? So just dragging my right foot in my sneaker. I'm like, just go barefoot. So,
Yeah,
but it was
no,
just
that's
funny to think
brutal.
of, like, yeah, you always normally have these things, but one time I decided not to. Or
Hmm.
I think everybody probably has a story like this too. You got to finish packing when you get to the trailhead. And I do remember getting to the top and it started to rain. It
Hmm.
was a quick hike, started to rain, opened my backpack. Well, thank God that raincoat is in my car right now because I forgot to put it in, even though it's in the car. So I was like, smooth, John.
Yep.
So as we're talking about, like, many people getting into it, something that I admire, and sometimes I get worried with a lot of the apps that people use. Now, a lot of applications that people use for hiking, they're great. I mean, these things are awesome. When you see like where you are, you remember where you are, also your pace, and it can help you. But I think sometimes it gives a little false sense of security too. I would
Yep.
rather people also know how to use a compass.
Mm.
I It's weird when you can ask some people, again, not making fun of people that don't know, but it's like, if you had an idea which way is north, do you know? And it's amazing how the phone comes out immediately. Now,
Yeah.
again, I love using my device too. I do, but it's almost, a paper map and a compass is completely off the charts.
Right.
And no pun intended. And the fact that you don't know. And I will say that if your phone dies, there is no backup plan. It's plan A and that's it.
Right.
And that does get me worried at times when I hear people like literally just talk about, do you have a backup plan? I have my phone. What if it doesn't work? What if
Hmm.
something breaks? Always, you should have, some sort of a backup plan. And so, again, with your experience with the search and rescue, has that happened, or have you talked to people that these situations arise, and you want to say without lecturing, it's like, you really should know how to use this.
Yeah, we've seen a number of folks over trusting the phone. Like you said, the phone is a great tool. It's a great resource to have with that tracking and that. I like to use it as a reference. So I'll use apps like
Hmm.
All Trails and Gaia. I'll use those as a reference for planning hikes. I will even look at them at times on the hike, but they are not the end all be all. There is no substitution for a map and a compass, and equally important, if not more important, the knowledge for how to use it. So a lot of folks
Hmm.
might be shoving a map and a compass in their pack, but they have no idea how to use a compass to navigate. They might know how to pull it out and say, okay, now I know where north is, but how can you use this with your map to help yourself actually navigate or wayfind? And that's the skill that needs to come with it. A lot of folks, when they get off trail, they'll pull out their phone and go, okay, well, All Trail says I'm over here now. So if I just walk this way, I can refine the trail. Sure, that'll work. But like you said, what if your phone dies? What if you
Mhm.
drop it? What if the tracking suddenly ceases to function for whatever reason? You need to have another plan, another option. And I think with our sort of over dependence on technology, more and more folks are going out with, like you said, a false sense of security. Oh, I have my phone. The phone has the map on it. I'm good. The phone even has a light on it. We've seen a lot of people go out without headlamps because they figure, well, my iPhone has a flashlight. And then they don't think about, well, what about when that inevitably dies and the fact that you now can't have hands free? So there's that extra thought process that needs to go into the phone is a great tool, but it is not a savior. It is not everything, and it is no substitution for wilderness skills that one should have if you're heading out in the backcountry.
Hmm. It's or bumping into somebody, and they did talk about having a compass, as you said. Case in point, they did not know how to use it. Actually, it was still in its package, and it was like, all right, that's handy. Okay, that's good. But it's like you need to use that with the map too, because that's why they're there. Yeah, so it's not. It takes some skill, takes some learning, but once you learn it, I mean, it's in your head. Is battery's never going to run out. Doesn't matter if it rains, and if your life proof case breaks, doesn't
Mhm,
matter because you do know how to use this, and it's just something you get used to, watching the sun, or even when you're finishing up hikes at nighttime, which is a lot of fun.
mhm,
Stars, using stars as a reference too.
sure.
And for hiking, like some of my favorite times to go to Franconia Ridge is in the fall, and I'd
Mhm,
love to start at 1 o'clock, get to watch the sunset, but obviously the whole time coming down, I am in the dark,
right.
and there's nobody there and no bugs. So I love that. No, but it's just that
That's
it is
key.
kind of cool to use the references with, when the moon's going to be coming up, and also using the stars.
Mhm,
Obviously, I'm on a trail, but just to use that as a base. But something else that I'm remembering a story, speaking of Franconia Ridge, in the Greenleaf Trail, a couple of summers ago, there were two hikers. They were new, and they were using their phone,
mhm.
and they have like 3 miles to go, and they decided, but if we just walk west, we'll be there at the road in no time. No concept of contour lines, but
Yes.
on their map, it was just all these contour lines are like jammed very close together because it's okay. If they ever watch this, I'm not trying to make fun of you, but I kind of am. It's a cliff, and so they ended up walking west to a point and going down the steep embankment to the point where they were actually stuck on a
Mhm,
cliff. Thankfully, thankfully, they did. They were rescued. Everything was fine, but holy crap! It's like you really didn't know what a contour line was
right.
while you're looking at a map on a phone. I guess this
Yeah.
could be. I'm sorry. Yes. Yep.
No, I was just going to say that's another key is even without the compass aspect, just knowing how to read a map and knowing what those lines mean, knowing it should be everyone should have a good idea when you look at the topography on a map and check out contour lines and elevation, what that design on the map might look like in terms of an actual 3D mountain. That takes some skill to sort of think about what that might be, but what kind of a summit is it? Is it a cone? Is this a ledge area? Is this cliff? Is this cliffy here? And when you learn that, you can know what to avoid when you're trying to navigate and say you're off trail or you're trying to bushwhack or self rescue or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
But that's the beauty of our community up here is there's so many opportunities for folks to be able to acquire those skills. So a lot of people I think get intimidated with the skill set that they think they need when they get into the activity. But there's a lot of classes, AMC does classes, different schools do classes. You can get into these instructional environments and pick up skills you don't have, and there's really no excuse for not attempting to do that. If you're gonna, if you're gonna try to play a sport, you're not gonna, go play hockey and never have laced up a pair of skates before. You're probably gonna take a learn to skate class. Same thing. If you're gonna do some serious hiking in the whites, you should maybe take a compass and map course, and there's no shame in that. In fact, that I wish more people would.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was just trying to think about like when I first learned how to use a compass when I was a kid, and I can't remember the name of the sport. Shoot, you might know the name. Basically, you're given um the task. You're using your coordinates and your compass and how many paces to get to
Oh,
one area, and then
yeah.
it's a race,
Mhm.
but it's not really that easy because I mean, where your pacing that you're going, the clicks that you're using, you end up at a particular, let's say, stake at, it could be like a yellow stake, but there could be a red stake, 4 feet to your right or your left. So it is pretty precise. But the more you get better at this, it's amazing how it does go from, I have no idea other than it points at directions, to this is really an invaluable tool that you can use outside. And once you get that skill, or once you know how to use it, you're good to go. And
Yes.
you can practice it all the time. And I think maybe maybe some new sports, not new sports, maybe to bring that back, especially so many people into the outdoors. That's something that you can really show off and be like, I really know how to use this, and I know how to pace myself on a map and using a compass, etc. I think that'd be kind of neat.
Yeah, I agree, because that's something I think translates well. Is I have a couple friends that are into geocaching, and that skill translates well to navigating on trail too. So sometimes there's a lot of geocaching that's done in an urban environment, but that kind of navigating skill can translate over, and you have some basic understanding of coordinates and wayfinding and trying to get from one point to another. So that's something that has enough in common that might be a starting point for folks if they've done that before, but maybe they've never been, compass map in the woods. So any starting point people can get from, or anything that they can liken it to that makes sense to them as a jumping off point, I think is great.
Definitely. And geocaching, that's great. It's great that you brought that up. And geocaching is interesting out here in wherever, White Mountains, Green Mountains, especially when you're doing bushwhacking. You have this mission that you set for yourself, and you're going out there like, wow, when was the last time someone was here? Next thing you know, you've actually just stumble upon someone's geocache, and you
Mhm.
are like out there. It's like, all right, not as special as I thought, but
Right.
it's good to see that other people, it's like-minded people. That's what it is.
Mhm.
But no, you're right. You have this list, and you get to go from there for finding these really cool things. And now that we're talking about bushwhacking, geocaching, getting off the beaten trail, love to bring up one of your pictures again, and we'll talk about this one right here. And it's a slide that you had said that you had just done, and you reminded me, I have not done this slide yet. I've looked at it. I just haven't done it yet, but it looks exciting. So tell us about this. One of your other outdoor activities with everything that you do.
So I've recently, in the last couple of years, really gotten more into bushwhacking uh, as an addendum to my to the hikes I like to do, because it is a bit more of a challenge, and you do have to have those refined navigating skills, and you're traversing terrain that requires a bit of extra care and maybe technical approach than what a trail would dictate. Uh, and it has that rugged and wild feel to it for sure. So this right here, we're looking up into the White Wall Slide on White Wall Mountain. So if anyone doesn't know what White Wall Mountain is, essentially, if you are on Z Cliff on Zealand and you're looking out and you see this giant scar of a slide, and this is how I actually found out about it. You're looking out and you're like, what the heck is that? And then you look into what that is, and you look at the map and you figure, okay, that's White Wall. And then you learn about the slide. And that's what sucked me in, was actually being on Z Cliff at one point years ago and looking out at that and being like, I want to climb that one day. And
Yes.
not just going out and doing it, but actually preparing for it. And this late spring, early summer, it was kind of in that transition time, I finally got out there and did it. And basically it's right off the Ethan Pond Trail. So as you head in and you're going down the Ethan Pond Trail, right before you get to the Z Cliff Trail, to head up to Z Cliff, which I've never actually been on that trail. It's a pretty steep way up from Ethan Pond to Z Cliff. On the opposite side, there's this massive slide on White Wall. And this is a very loose, active slide. So in terms of the risk and danger factor, it's pretty high. The boulders are untested. The slide can be reactivated at any time. You could set off rock falls. They could set off naturally, just like in the case of avalanches. And as you're navigating this scree and boulder field, you have to use an extreme degree of caution to know how to test material, how to get from one point to another, use things like islands of safety and assess the terrain and work your way up this slide. But it is absolutely exhilarating to get up into this into this terrain, because I mean, pretty much you're not going to have anybody up there unless you're going in a group. I was solo the day I did it, and outside of some wildfire smog, it was a gorgeous, pretty warm and beautiful day. And as you're going up, you basically it's a great problem solving type of skill builder, because you look at the terrain that lays out in front of you and you sort of plan your route. You're obviously not following blazes or cairns or anything. You're looking at, where do I want to go from where to where to mitigate risk? And you look for things, islands of safety would be clumps of trees, darker rocks, clusters of areas that look like they've been undisturbed for a while. So if you've got a bunch of trees growing in a slide of reasonable height, it's safe to say that, well, the slide hasn't knocked them out yet, so that doesn't mean it never will, but that material over there is going to be more stable. So if you can make your way from one island of safety to another and mitigate that risk and reduce the amount of time you're just flailing around in the open slide, it's a better course of action. Now, sometimes you may not have a choice. You'll have to traverse that loose material, but you always want to be testing, and you always want to have an escape route and know what you're going to do if something starts to fall. And if you're going in a team, you want to be mindful of who's below you and do things, chunk it sections at a time, where you're not going to kick or dislodge material down onto your partners down there. So a lot of things to consider. This one is actually the second steepest slide in the Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont area. And it's second only to Mount Lowell in the Lowell chute there, which is something else that's on a maybe list of something I want to get to. But this one is number 2, and it's no joke. I mean, it is extremely steep, and the slide portion is only the beginning. You get up, and there's basically this deep, kind of almost canyon-like point when you get to the top of the slide, where you got to go, and there's no escape from this little gully. You've got to go through it to get up, and you're kind of stuck in there. So that the risk then kind of grows at that point if anything were to happen, because there's no total escape route from that little chute that you're in.
Right.
But that's, it is beautiful in there, and your view of, back towards Z Cliff, and once you get up high there, you get to the white wall ledges, and you have 360 views, and you've got nobody with you. You just got that solitude and that sense of accomplishment, and it's really like nothing else being up there. Yeah, this is being up on the ledges as after you top out from the slide, and there are a number of these smooth exposed ledgy areas on and near the summit. So the summit is sort of off to the left of this picture in a more wooded spot, and then you've got these ledges that are off to one side, and looking back towards Z Cliff, and you can really explore throughout these ledges. I sat and had a snack there, and like I said, aside from some wildfire smog, it was a gorgeous view. I mean, one of the top views in the Whites, I would say, when you're looking out from those ledges on White Wall.
Easily. I have not been on the top of White Wall, but Zealand Valley, I think, is almost, I know lots of people love it. It's almost underrated. When people really, they get focused on other areas like Franconia Ridge, which is beautiful. Mm-hmm. But every time, when I'm on top of Z Cliff, just looking down the valley, I'm like, I could sit here for 3 hours.
Yeah.
I've done that before. But the just sit there and just observe. It's just fantastic. But on a what you were saying about, especially going up that slide, that's the thing that I've always thought about. It was almost at the top, as you were just saying, it gets more and more narrow. It's like this small valley. It's like that. The technicalities like just grow, and it's an active slide. And if anybody would like to get into like going up slides, a good beginner one would be the Watcher in Franconia Notch.
Right.
That's a nice one because it's small, but you get the point about what it's like to go across a scree field. Been up there many, many times, and every time you go, it does seem a little bit different. Under your foot, the way you feel these rocks, these are good sized rocks, and they start to move. And at times you're using your hands as well. And I remember like one time going up, and I was definitely kicking up some of the rocks. I don't want to say being sloppy, but I just wasn't being too meticulous the way I was going up. And I ended up turning around and looking at some of the trees because I was still at the bottom of the scree field. And then you see the impacts. Trees like where rocks have just come down, and you're looking up this steep slope. It's like, yeah, even though this rock might be the size of a basketball, I mean, look at the impacts it's doing on a tree that's probably about 80 years old, and or even like where they bounced off the rock slides, and that's when you really start to say, okay, this is a lot more attention that you have to take as you get a lot more care. And as we was talking about an escape route too, and I've done that too. You just look at like a clump of trees. It's like, okay, well, that's safely been growing for years. So I'll
Right.
make my way over here for a little bit if I need to stop, regroup, and then continue on from there.
Mhm.
But a quick funny story. I know we're talking about people getting lost or not navigating well, or sometimes not thinking right.
Mhm.
2 years ago, I just wanted to go to Ethan Pond. That's what I wanted to do. I parked, heading my way into Zealand Valley, and I love like the old railroad bed, which
Yeah.
is you're going down the Zealand Railroad, which J.E. Henry had built,
Right.
and ready to go. And Ethan Pond Trail, then you have the Z Cliff Trail. Well, I don't know what the heck I was thinking, but I was on go mode,
Mhm.
way too much go mode, because I went right up Z Cliff, and I'm going
Ah,
and going, going, going. Finally, I've been to the area before. I
mhm.
snapped out of wherever I was. I'm like, I want to be over there. How the heck? I was all the way to the top of Z Cliff by then. So I'm like, all right, Ethan Pond, you're going to be a very roundabout way down through the valley, back up to the old railroad bed. And I continued on from there. Needless to say, I added on a couple of hours onto that hike.
A
But
scenic detour.
it was a very scenic detour. And I'd never taken that connecting trail from Ethan Pond Trail to go up to Z Cliff. And
Yeah.
that's steep. That is a
Yeah.
nice steep trail. That was
That
a lot of fun.
I wanna do that. That's so now that you've said you have done it, I really wanna try it. I haven't been on that, and I've looked at it on the map. I'm like, "Oh, that looks steep." I'm into steep stuff, so that looks cool. It's a quick way up Z Cliff, but, yeah, I've yet to do that. Use it as a reference point for when I was planning out the White Wall ascent, in terms of where it is versus where the slide is in terms of calculating mileage and stuff, but I've yet to be on that one.
Oh, it's fun, especially when it's unexpected, and
Yeah.
you're trying to make up a little time too. I was like, and looking down from Z Cliff to get down. Like, I think it'll be a little bit more fun going up than going down. I'm just like, and I had
Yeah,
my hiking poles with me. I think a couple of times I'm like, Chuck, I'll just catch
right.
up to him later.
Yep.
So,
I do that a lot.
and it's funny because my poles are too old that I really can't collapse them anymore. But I love them, and it's the perfect height. And so now we have a picture. This is great. Your route going up to Whitewall, and everybody can see what we were talking about. How as you're more than halfway up, it gets more and more narrow, and
Mm.
that is really badass. Andy, good for you. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was amazing going through that section. I basically my strategy in there is I hugged the sheer rock face to the right quite a bit, and there were occasionally some useful handholds over there, stuff that wasn't brittle or too chossy or loose, so that you could kind of rely on it. But um, definitely was still evaluating everything. And then when you top out, you get this sense of relief when you finally can whack through the scrub up there towards the slabs and cliffs there. You finally get this sense of, okay, I'm out of harm's way. I know I'm not going down that way. I know people have. I did not choose to go down that way. I actually went down on the north side. So I went, from that point left to the summit, and then I continued beyond the summit and bushwhacked my way down on the other side, because I didn't want any part of going down the slide in this instance.
No way. No, you couldn't. No, thanks. No, I would
Yeah.
not. I would not want to go down that slide. And I haven't even been on it. I haven't even gone up. No. And so something else that's pretty cool about when you're looking up these cliffs, when you look at the lower part of the picture, that's the old railroad bed.
Right.
And when you're looking up, I wish I knew exactly where the picture is, but there is this huge, I don't know if it's a glacial erratic or if it's just a large piece of rock that I believe it's to where you're looking up that slide to the right. And this thing is enormous.
Mm.
But it's looks like it's just balancing on the cliff. Obviously, it's
Right.
sitting there pretty secure. And I know you know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
Anybody who's gone down there, because you will look up at this like monolith that's just sitting on the cliff, and it's fascinating to think like how that landed there, how
Right.
long it's been there, and you look at all these rocks that are just up there, just slowly but surely eroding, breaking, falling to the ground. But you will look up at that again. I call it the monolith.
Yeah.
Just it's very intimidating when you walk below it.
Absolutely. Because there's not a lot that potentially be holding that back from cascading down. And one of the things when you're on the Eastern Pond Trail, when you're on that old railroad bed and you're getting close to the slide when you're going to go up, you look down to your right, so looking in the direction towards Z Cliff. There's a massive, if you're ever doubting if this is an active slide, there's a massive smattering of boulder and boulder field debris off to that right hand side,
Mhm.
where it kind of kicks you into a sense of almost like a wake up call, like, okay, this is serious, as if there was any doubt to that, but it kind of gives you some perspective for sure.
Definitely. Look at the that fairly recent slide about 3 or 4 years ago in Franconia Notch,
Mm,
pretty much across where the old man was. That
right.
was fun to go explore that slide of and getting up there, going through the debris field, all the trees that had just been broken, just snapped in half, these big trees. And when you go to see some of the boulders, the newly rested boulders, next to other boulders that probably have about 10 inches of moss
Hmm.
or plants or trees growing on them. And you just look, I was looking at two boulders side by side. One's brand new, light colored, light brown, white in color, massive boulder next to another one that had probably fallen maybe 100 years ago. So it is constantly changing and things are, well, constantly falling. And it
Right.
does, as you said, it's a little snap in reality. It's like anybody could have been on that trail and that would have been absolutely terrifying to be on
Yeah.
that trail and just to hear that, never mind seeing things flying down at you, but just to hear that around you is just wild.
Yeah, that sheer force that is, that potential energy locked within such mass and such speed. I mean, trees become toothpicks, and humans even worse so if you were in the path of something like that.
No, no thanks. No thanks. There's plenty of history in the White Mountains of people getting stuck or
Oh
getting in
yeah.
the crosshairs of a landslide.
Hmm.
Something I would love to see on video, love to hear it on video, but I hope nobody goes through that and
Oh, absolutely.
ever. So it's fun to go look at the debris afterwards, but that's don't want to be in the way of that at all.
No.
And as we're talking, we've covered a lot. I knew we were going to cover a lot, Andy. I knew we're just gonna. It was, and I just looked at the
Time's
time.
up.
I'm like, holy God, we've been talking for an hour. And so
Right.
your
Doesn't seem like
stories, no, it doesn't seem like it at all. I'm like, yeah, it's been like 20 minutes.
it.
No, it's been an hour.
Yep.
And and so, and hopefully everybody's been having a good time listening to your stories right now. And I knew we are going to be, there's even more subjects we could cover. I would love to have you come on again. And,
Sure.
but before we sign off, the, some of the things that you're working on right now. You were in Maine. You're on some great
Yes.
mountains in Maine, and you kind of gave me a little anecdote of something that you're working on. If you want to talk about that for a little bit.
Sure. So just got back from a Maine trip with my girlfriend Sarah, and we went up to do a really great Baxter trip, but we did a warm up to that before we did Katahdin, which is this mountain called Little Spencer Mountain, just sort of to the north-ish of Moosehead Lake. And Little Spencer has one trail, and it's called the Ram Trail. And amongst other things, it has a 70-plus foot chimney that has been fitted with various ropes that to aid in your ascent of this chimney. And it is very extreme. We kind of tried to challenge ourselves. We didn't use the ropes at all for the ascent. We were able to just up climb the chimney, but it was nice knowing they were there for sure because this was a pretty extreme chimney here. And then we did use them a little bit on the way down. But this trail had a little bit of everything. It had a scree field that was part of a slide, an older slide. It had the chimney. It had really great views from some cliffs, and then good summit views, and you could see Moosehead Lake, and just a gorgeous view from that top there. But the thing that drew me there was that chimney with those ropes and that technical ascent, semi-technical ascent anyway. So not quite rock climbing, but good scramble. And this trail wound its way onto this list I've sort of been creating that I call the New England Severe 65. And what that is a bunch of trails that have some kind of a challenging element to them that kicks them a notch above your everyday trail. So it would either have some kind of scrambling, some kind of ledges, or some kind of ladders, or some kind of potentially fear-inducing element to it. So it's like the terrifying 25 expanded to include all of New England. So there's trails from Vermont that I've put on there, trails from Maine, and basically all 34 of the Terrifying 25 and electives are on there, plus a couple extra things from New Hampshire that aren't on there that could certainly deserve to be, like the Holt Trail on Mount Cardigan, let's say.
Mhm.
And it's sort of my own little list that I want to check off all of, and I've made good headway into most of it, but that was one I hadn't done yet. So that had been one I've been looking to do, and it was a perfect warm up the day before we head into Baxter to do Katahdin and the Knife Edge, which is my favorite trail. This was a nice little, because it's only about 2.5, a little less than 2.5 round trip, but it is crazy gain in that short ascent distance. So it was grueling and challenging in all the best of ways.
That definitely sounds so. I love that. I like they had ropes there for assistance, but we didn't use them.
Yeah, we wanted to see if we could not use them on the way up. It was, sort of okay, if we have to, we will. We're not going to do anything stupid, but let's try to not use it and then see how we can scramble up. And there was enough, reasonable handholds and footholds to make that possible. But on the way down, it was fun to use the ropes and then be able to sort of canyoneer a bit and then, splay out and, kick the wall and use the rope to kind of lower yourself. That being said, however, I will put a cautionary tale in here. We didn't set these ropes. So these were preset ropes, and that is something that brings with it that degree of unknown.
Yes.
Trusting ropes that you didn't set is always a gamble. You want to test the ropes as much as you can, but you don't know how long those ropes have been there, what shape they're in. Even if you look at them and you think you can discern that they're in feasible enough shape for the stress you're going to be putting on them, things can happen. So that is a cautionary tale and a risk you take to a trail that's got preset ropes in it. There aren't a lot of these things around, but if anyone's going to go there and check that out, I would just, caution, hey, you didn't put the rope, so don't trust it without some caveat or understanding that, something could happen here.
Yeah, I remember that on Percy Peak South. There's a quick scramble and there is a rope. Again, it's not that long that you're using the rope, but
Right.
the fact is you're still gonna fall 12 feet. So
Yep.
as you said, just always have in the back of your head, give it a really good yank. I mean, just take your body weight and just hang it on, and don't make a long time on it. Try to get off it as quickly as you can. That's all. Seriously, always in the back of my head. It's like this. Yeah. Well, obviously, if this thing breaks, but it's like it's interesting that you say that, and yeah, there's not too many ropes like that out there, but yeah, major caution when you're doing that.
Right.
But
Like I think of Old Spec, the eyebrow in Old Spec too has got various assistive devices, and there's one little section that has a rope for a crossing, and same thing. Just test it out, make sure that it's to the best of your ability. You can kind of give it a look, see, and a feel before you commit.
oh yes, what was it on the Mahoosic Range? I think it's a Big Spencer. I think it was Big Spencer Mountain. Just north of Carlos. I might have the wrong name right now, but there was a pretty steep scramble, almost rock climbing, almost. But somebody brought up like an aluminum ladder
Yeah.
and they fastened it. And it
Yeah.
was funny when Kristen and I were going to go up this ladder. It's probably about 20 feet. It's extended. And so as we were kind of pulling on it, I'm like, oh, it seems secure. Well, actually, really don't. I guess we're going to use it. But it was just kind of strange that someone had brought a ladder up there. There's no reference of this on any guidebook, which was hysterical. I'm like, and I guess it's safe. Have at it. So
Yeah. Well, that's like that eyebrow on Old Spec. It's got this. I call it the pool ladder. There's this tiny little, probably 3-4 foot ladder that you would use to get in like an above ground pool almost, that someone has propped up against this little outcropping of a ledge. And it probably doesn't warrant a ladder in this spot, but it's just kind of sitting there. And I always make fun of it. I'm like, oh, there's the pool ladder, because it just looks so out of place. It's not the typical rungs into rocks that you see that Maine loves to do.
right.
It's just this ladder that's been set there, and it's kind of out of place looking.
You're like, okay, well, whatever works. Sure. Someone thought it was a good idea, and here it is.
Right.
All right. Well, Andy, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your stories with us and your experiences. And would love to have you come on again. And I know we can pick some other subjects again. We covered a few, and I know there's so much more that we can talk about.
I would love to come back, and I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a lot of fun to talk through and discuss a lot of this stuff. Has been great.
Great. It absolutely has. And I've learned a lot, and perfect. All right, just hold on for a little bit and we're going to sign off. I'll talk to you very soon. And everybody else, thank you very much for watching the Pemi Valley podcast. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. My friend Rob, who's part of the Squam Lakes Association, who's also a teacher, scientist, and he's going to talk about the ecology of Newfound Lake in New Hampshire. It's going to be very interesting. You don't want to miss that. And yeah, we're always set for your questions. I'll be putting that up on Facebook for Rob. So if any questions before he comes on, of course, absolutely post them, and we'll go from there. All right. And we will see you all soon.
Insects annoying you? Bond Cliff Bug Protection is all natural and made in New Hampshire. Repel those biting insects. Bond Cliff Bug Protection for all those who work and play outdoors.